Welcome to the Engineering and Public Works Roadshow, a joint effort from the American Council of Engineering Companies, the American Public Works Association, and the American Society of Civil Engineers. And this week we're here in Winston-Salem at the Great Trail State Conference, celebrating the Great Trail State of North Carolina, and really putting a focus on an area of infrastructure that is one of the best community impact areas of infrastructure, I think, and that is really the recreational side of infrastructure, and talking about trails, rail to trails, or just greenway projects, things that get people engaged outside, get active, and really appreciate their communities so much better. And we're focusing in on a really interesting project right now. It's the Woodfin Riverside Park and Taylor's Wave. And joining us, we have representatives from two firms that were engaged with that project. We have Megan Foy with Equinox, which Equinox, the firm, was the lead designer on the project, and Matthew Fogelman with ECS Southeast. Your firm was engaged in as a consultant on the project as well. There are a couple of other firms engaged with the project as well, and we'll talk about their involvement. But really want to, we talked a lot about greenways, we talked a lot about trails. This is a great riverside project that has a whitewater component, which I think is very interesting. Let's talk about kind of some background here. How did the project come about, and how did your firms get involved with it?
Sure, I can talk a little bit to the beginnings of the project. It started with the whitewater community in Western North Carolina. I believe Scott Shipley with S2O Engineering was engaged to identify a location for a whitewater wave, and they came across this site on the French Broad River in Woodfin, North Carolina, and they worked with a local individual too, Mark Hunt. He was very heavily engaged in the project, identified this, and then Woodfin, the town of Woodfin, was very supportive in making it happen, and our firm, Equinox, was brought in a little bit later in the process as the designers of the master plan for the park and the wave site, as well as doing the construction documents for the Riverside Park section.
And from ECS's perspective, you were brought in doing some geotech work and then also some other consultancy work on the project as well, correct?
That's right. So we were the geotechnical engineer for both of those projects, the Riverside Park and the Wave project. And we're also doing construction inspections. During construction, the project's actually under construction right now.
Yeah. This is something, because that area of the state, I mean, there's a very active whitewater community, right? I mean, this is where you go if you want to paddle, which I appreciate, but I don't think I could ever try. Watching some of these waves, and I know that there was a wave design that is Taylor's Wave, because it's named after Taylor Hunt, who was a local whitewater rafter who unfortunately died in an accident in Ecuador. But that design component was interesting. Because my understanding, and if you can speak to this, that they actually took it to a lab outside the United States. They went to the Czech Republic to an institute where they actually did hydraulic modeling on that. Not a lot of projects that we've heard that actually go international and they do the testing, so it seems like there are a lot of different components here. I mean, can you talk about how complex this was from a master plan perspective, and also from just guiding it to the point where it right now is in construction?
So I'll let Megan talk about the master planning side. The engineering side, as you mentioned, is absolutely unique in a lot of ways. We as engineers do a lot of trail projects and greenway projects, and we've got various blueways as well across North Carolina as part of our trail system. But this project being specifically right in the river is pretty unique. So it's not just adjacent to the river, which is a big part of it, but the wave project itself is literally in the river. So there's a lot of engineering that goes into the dynamics of how the river flows. You can imagine, especially a river like the French Broad. It's a pretty good sized river, very, very old river, and a lot of water flow that moves through that. So to engineer a feature that's going to take advantage of that flow is really challenging in a lot of ways. Just all the dynamics of how the flow works, the variations in the contours of the river bottom, all of that comes into play. And so you can model that, you can run calculations, but really at the end of the day, there's just not a good alternative to literally building a scale model
Yeah,
and flooding it. And that's what
testing
they
it.
did.
Yeah.
So the team went to Prague. They went to one of the premier hydraulic laboratories in the world, literally, and built a 1/30th scale model of the river, which included full contours of the river bottom that were taken from laser scans and all of that. And then built, different versions of what these in-river features might look like.
Yeah.
Flooded them and tweaked them a little bit here and there until they really kind of dialed in just the characteristics that they wanted. So in doing that, they were really able to not only dial in the wave feature itself. So there's the whitewater component with the wave, which is a standing wave that you can surf on with kayaks. You can literally get out there with a surfboard and surf on it if you want to. But then, the French Broad River itself is such a important part of the local outdoor economy there. There's a lot of people that use the French Broad River. Whitewater kayakers and people looking for adventure is one of them. A lot of people tube down the river. A lot of people do stand-up paddleboarding. There's a lot of people that use the river for a lot of different ways. So maybe not everybody wants to go through a whitewater section if you're just trying to stand up paddleboard, So in addition to that wave feature, there's also a bypass that I think is every bit as important to make sure that people can use the river the way they want to. They don't have to go into the wave part if they don't want to. Fish and other aquatic species can traverse the area without having their environment too disrupted. So that modeling, that full-scale modeling, let them dial the wave in itself, as well as really make sure that bypass feature worked the way that they intended it to.
Yeah, I'll take the bypass. I'll be the
The bypass.
I'll be in the tube going around.
You'll be going down, the fish will be going up.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you're floating down a lazy afternoon on a tube, then you take the bypass.
Yes.
That's more my speed. So
Yes.
I mean, the wave feature is significant. The way that it was fine-tuned. I mean, I think for anybody out there who's interested in engineering and is maybe looking at this, it's a good example of the cool stuff that you can do. Because the only way to test it is to replicate it in a lab and actually, tweak it. And the fact that you're tweaking Mother Nature, you're taking a river that's been around for eons, and you're just kind of plussing it up in a little different ways and just trying to figure out how can you fine-tune it. That's cool on its own. But with the park, I mean, there's a lot more to it, right? Because you have beach access, you have different areas and kiosks that go around. So, talk about the site itself in a larger scale.
Yes. So the site is a really interesting site. One thing of note is, just upstream, there's a DOT bridge that crosses the river. And just downstream, there's a dam that's been there since the 1800s. And so there's a lot going on in just this section of the river. The site itself has kind of been abandoned for a while. There's a bit of debris and trash underground. Industrial use. It's a riverside area in the past. In Asheville, along the river, they've been dump sites. There's been, industrial uses. So one thing that makes me really proud about Asheville and Woodfin is this revitalization of the Riverfront area that's happening. And there's so much community support. Like we mentioned the whitewater community, but then there's also nonprofits, RiverLink, the town of Woodfin, and all these entities coming together to make this happen. So, when we did the master planning process, there was a lot of thought that went into how can we best meet the needs of all the community, not just the paddlers, and what can we give to this park that can make it useful for everyone. So the park itself will have a large parking area, it will have playground uses, it has a play slope, it has beach access, it has an amphitheater where people can go and watch whitewater competitions, it has a pavilion, and it's going to be a really exciting place to be.
Yeah, one thing that it's been a constant throughout the interviews that we've done is that each one of these projects had direct community involvement, either grassroots involvement or having to go in and deal with different stakeholders. And I think, something that gets lost in talking about engineering projects is the amount of work that has to go in away from the science, away from the math, and actual contact with civic groups, public interest groups. I mean, that part of the job. I mean, how do you guys, was that something you assumed was going to be part of it when you got into the business, or was that something that you realized after you started working that like, oh, well, there's a group that might be opposed to doing this or what have you?
Well, when you get in the business, I mean, I tell you, in engineering school, they don't talk about that side nearly enough. Perhaps as planners and other folks, maybe more so. But that's always a challenge. How do we make these projects turn into reality? Where's the money going to come from? Who's in support of it? Who's not in support of it? How do you build those teams and coalitions of support to be able to make these things happen? I can tell you on these projects here that we're talking about with the town of Woodfin, certainly a very realistic example. The list of contributors to the funding for this project is a very long one. Megan mentioned Riverlink is a local nonprofit organization that's a significant funder. The Buncombe County Tourism Development Authority is a significant funder, and a large portion of the funding also came from the town themselves and the residents there. There was a referendum that was voted on and passed pretty overwhelmingly by the local residents to help provide a significant part of the funding themselves. But definitely a lot of support, and I'm glad to see on these projects a big part of that support comes from the local residents there themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the economic impact is tremendous because you're not just revitalizing a riverfront, which is something which is great anyway, but you are providing that year-round reason for people to come. Secondary economic impacts, businesses opening up, small businesses to serve the paddling community or serving whoever else is there. How does that, feel from a design standpoint of being able to say that, this one thing could unleash so much more economic activity to the area?
It's incredible to imagine what's going to come after this. Looking at that corridor, the Woodfin Greenway and Blueway connects from downtown Asheville all the way through this park past Craggy Dam, and maybe further on into Madison County. I mean, there's so much potential, and I think the changes are going to be seen shortly. Yeah.
It truly is an example of just how these projects can really transform regions. I mean, it's just, and really be, I mean, there are so many areas of the country that have one aspect which is locked away, right? And it could be access to a park, it could be access to a river, it could be something else. And without the infrastructure to get people there, they're never going to be able to unlock that. And both the land development, the planning, and the engineering coming together helps actually unlock that.
I think these projects are going to be transformative for that area for sure. Woodfin is right adjacent to Asheville on the north side. It's right by the river. It's a great location, and they've got that tremendous natural asset that is the French Broad River. And so kudos to them for leveraging it and making happen all the benefits that can come from that. Megan mentioned the Woodfin Greenway and Blueway project, which really is, these projects we're talking about is kind of a centerpiece of this larger project that, as Megan mentioned, includes 5 miles of greenways and multiple trails, multiple parks. And these are all pretty much right in that French Broad River corridor, which again, it has a long history of industrial use, has a long history of just being underutilized and having various challenges. And so I think a lot of this work is going to do a lot to revitalize those areas, have an opportunity to do a lot of environmental cleanup and ecological benefits and all of that is part of it. So once all this gets in place, it really is going to transform that region, I'm sure.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this. It's going to be exciting for the people who live there and tourists who come into Asheville.
Everybody has to come check it out.
Everybody's got to come check it out. I mean, Asheville is always high on the list for people to visit, so this is another reason to come out and enjoy the area. So, Matt, Megan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic. And again, this has been the Engineering and Public Works Roadshow, coming to you from the Great Trails State Conference, Winston Salem, North Carolina, and we'll see you next time.